should be seeing the SolidWorks model right now. I just created a quick model for this demonstration. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that in our first round. So really we're just going to go kind of through the features of EC first, walk through some of the processes, saving, publishing, those kinds of things. And then we'll come back and we'll really kind of run through more of the day in the life of a designer and show you more of a use case that's kind of more of a real world type use case, which is you would see as a designer interacting with the Agile environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this design and I'm going to start off and just save this in Agile. So through the Agile menu, I'll use this save function. And it's going to pop up this web save dialog here. Now what you'll see is you'll see the component represented in two areas. One is up top. It'll show you the design structure. This will make a little more sense when we get to an assembly. But below it also shows you a tabulated view of the same information. These are both interactive, top and bottom, and if I double click on it, it opens up the details pane. Now this is where I can go in and do things like maybe I want to pick a particular subclass for this item. I can define what the subclass would be whenever I vault this information. So if you recall back on the presentation, we looked at two sides, right? There was a design and there was a part. You're seeing the same thing represented here. The item is the part and the design is obviously the design. I can use the auto number feature from Agile to actually generate this base part number. And you'll notice at the bottom, it'll generate the same number and append the SolidWorks prefix or postfix to it. I can provide a description. And also below what you'll see is this is again divided into two areas. One is design information. So this is where I can categorize and set information. For instance, maybe this is a library type component. And instead of painted, really that doesn't apply to this. Maybe this is just, NA, let's say. If I scroll down a little more, you'll notice I've got some other areas here where I've got pull downs, like for instance material. I can define what this is, maybe it's a composite type, and the other information below. You also notice at the bottom you'll see the item properties, and this is where I can categorize information about the item or the part in Agile. So this can be the same set of information or they can be completely separate, and it really depends on the way you implement this. But for instance, I can take the make by, let's say this is going to be a by component, and I'll show you this in just a minute when I'm done. Once I'm complete, I'm going to say save here, and this is going to do a save as. So you'll notice it took that part, even though I had saved it on my hard drive in my workspace as a base number, which is like 456. This automatically generates this base part number for Agile, and it also applies that to the design. It's going to rename the file once it's done. So I'm just going to hit the save button here. And so in the background what happens is it generates the design object, it generates the part object. It's going to vault that file, and it's going to make the connections between them. So if I go into Agile and look for that part, let's just go in here and do a search for star 674. What I'll see is the part and the design showing here. I'm going to start off with the design. So in the design, you'll notice if I scroll down a little bit, the attribute information presented in Agile, this is where I went in and categorized things like I made a composite component, and I said the finish is really not applicable. I can also change things here. So I'm going to jump back into SolidWorks for 1 second. And if I go to the file properties, during that save process, it also took the same information from that EC dialog and pushed it back into my SolidWorks model. And so I see the same information listed here. What I want to do, though, is in my web interface, I'm just going to go ahead and make a change. So I'm going to show the bi-directional nature of the attribute information. So I'm just going to do an edit here, go down to standard attributes. I'm just going to change this from my first to my second project. So you'll notice now it's been updated in Agile, and if I go back to SolidWorks, under the Agile menu I just do the update properties. It's going to take that same information. It doesn't matter if it's one or many fields, whatever I map in, it's going to take that and propagate it back into the properties area for this design. So you'll see my second project there. I'm just going to set this to third, and I'll show you this also goes the other direction here in just a minute. Okay, so back in Agile, we were looking at the design object. You'll also notice that on the relationships tab, there's a relationship to a part. So if you remember the diagram I showed you from the presentation, it had the design on the left-hand side and the part on the right-hand side. This is where it generates that relationship to the part. And so this is the end item that's actually going to be released at some point. now. Right now it's just an introductory part. It just sits there and lives until I'm ready to actually release it. And I'll show you that in a minute. But the relationship is bidirectional. You'll see it back to the design. Also the attachment, if I scroll over just a little bit, what you'll see is this refers back to folder version 1 of that design. The reason that's important is because when I go to release something, it tags that as the released version going forward. So revision A would become, let's say, version 3 when I'm done. That way, if I ever go to that part, and maybe I'm not a designer, but I need to go access that information, I can always go back to it and look at it and make sure that I've got the as stored or as released design. So if I'm communicating to a manufacturer or somebody, party that's going to be using that information, they get the exact information that was released. So let's go back quickly to the design. What we'll do is back in SolidWorks, we're going to kind of continue the storyline here and show you some more functionality. So I'm just going to go to generate a little more geometry, and let's just put a field on this. We'll put a dome just to make it a little bit interesting. Now I'm just going to show it out. Now, my design may be complete, but the one thing I want is, maybe I want a drawing with this because I've still not gone paperless. I've still not gone to the model-based definition, so I still need a paper drawing. So in this case, we're going to generate a new drawing. We're just going to use the same design in that drawing. And I'll show you how these tie together. And the reason I want to kind of point this out is it's important to understand the interaction of the design object, the part object, and also how drawings play into this, because drawings are really a derivative of the physical 3D model. So I'll put a couple of views here. I'm just going to save this locally, and the reason I'm going to do this, I want to show you one of the features in here of Agile. So I'm just going to save it with some number. I'm going to use my Agile save now. So I just save that locally just using the normal SolidWorks save. I'll use the Agile save. And you'll notice it picks up the SolidWorks number that I put in when I just keyed it in. What I want to do, though, is I want to take that number and make it apply to the same base number of the 3D solid model. That's where a lot of companies will work, and I'll show you that in a second. The other thing is, when I did the first check-in of this library component, you'll notice that it's currently checked in. It's not available for save. If I hover over this little icon, it tells me at first must be checked out before I can vault it. So I'm going to go ahead and check it out right now. So I'm going to do a checkout on the fly. I'm also going to select the drawing, right-click, and do the Save As function. And so what this is going to do is going to look at its associated 3D model and apply that same base number and append the solid drawing to the end of it. So now this is ready to vault, but I want to do one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and release this design in the process of the save. So I'll generate a change order. So it's going to generate a change order in Agile. It's 93. And I'm going to take and switch my view here to an item assignment so I can actually see what this looks like as far as from the design and the part in Agile. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side is the design information. On the right-hand side is the part. I'll select the 3D model. I'm going to right-click and say Assign the change. So what it's going to do is assign that change order and propose a pending revision A to it. Now once I'm done, I'll just hit the Save button. And it's going to vault both the design and the drawing, the part in the drawing, back into Agile. And if I just switch over to Agile here for a second, what you'll see is a pop-up. It'll tell me it was successful, and it'll show you that it published. And if I just do a refresh here, what you'll notice now is I've now got version 2. Now in a minute you'll see this pop up, the icon as far as the generation for the thumbnail, but it takes a few minutes for it to complete because it's having to publish the drawing as well. But you'll notice this part, this design object, if I go to the Where Used tab, it's referring back to this SolidWorks drawing and obviously the part. If I go to the SolidWorks drawing here, what you'll notice is the SolidWorks drawing has no relationship directly to the part. It's actually coming along because it has an association to a part. It's a representative of the part. And it's really just a view, a development of it as far as how you want to document the information. So if I look at the structure, here's where it's pointed back to the part. And if I take the part and I go to the Relationships tab, and I want to go back to the Bill of Material end item here, the part that's going to be manufactured, what I'll see now is I've got a change object showing up here. It's got the icon next to it. If I look at the pending revision A and the attachment for that, what I'll see is I've got 3 attachments now. Before I just had 1, It was referring back just to the solid model, but when I added the drawing and I published that, it's going to add that as an attachment reference as well, version specific, just like the 3D model. If I select the PDF, I'm just going to do a get on this just to show you that the PDF is generated and actually stored back in Agile. You can download this directly from this part object in Agile. As well, I can select the SolidWorks part and open this up in the 3D viewer. And so the nice thing about this is because this interacts with the native data for SolidWorks through this viewer, people don't have to have SolidWorks on the desktop. They can still view the 3D native model directly in this interface for auto view. And I can do things like maybe I want to do a cross section on it. I want to go ahead and say when I invert the cut and show that. So I can actually go in as a person that's looking at this from a manufacturing standpoint and see this 3D information and actually do information exploration on it based on if I want to do cross sections or if I want to do markups and views and dimensioning, and I can actually go in and explore the object fully in this environment without having to have SolidWorks. So I'm going to go to the change order, and what we want to do is just release this through. Now, the one thing I should have pointed out when I was on it, on this part, on the design, excuse me, is down here you'll notice there's a value called NextRev. And the reason we use this, we've actually developed a little application that's kind of an ancillary application we supply whenever we do these implementations. It'll actually publish the next revision sequence, and the reason being is a lot of companies will presuppose the drawing revision and go ahead and put that on the change order before it's actually released. So they know it's going to become revision B. They want to assign that to the title block of the drawing. They want to see that that next revision field can be used to pull the information into the title block of the drawing. So in the change order, when I go through this, we'll see that actually transact. So I'll go to the change order. I'll look at the affected items here. What I want to do is change the lifecycle phase. So I'm going to set this to be production. I'll save that. I'm going to go to the workflow tab. Now, as a designer, normally wouldn't have this functionality, but for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to actually push this through with the same profile. But normally what would happen is the designer would push this to the submitted state. And this is where someone like a change analyst or my manager would actually take it and look at who should be appropriate for signing off on this. Now, because I've got the rights to be able to do this as this designer, I'll go ahead and push it all the way through the process. But for instance, the design manager would then say, well, I'm going to push it to the next state. I'm going to use my CAD1 as my approver and let that go. So as CAD1, who I'm logged in as, I'll now get this approve button. So now it's up to me to approve this. It's awaiting just one signature for this process. If I go in and approve this, you have to provide a password. If I say approve, it's actually going to deny it for a second because I've got my caps lock on and I actually have to provide the actual password. So didn't mean to do that, but just notice that when I was typing down here that I have my caps locks on. So now when I approve it, what you'll notice is up here it's going to jump to the next state, and because we've constructed Agile to automatically promote upon all signatures being met, it'll go from that first approval state to this next approval state. And you can define these workflows however you want. You can have as many approval states as you want. A lot of companies will have manufacturing involved and quality involved, and there'll be other groups that need to sign off before it becomes a release drawing or release design. But in this case, I'm just going to push it through manually, so it's going to complain a little bit here that not all signatures have been met. I'm just going to say OK. What you'll see on the History tab is Agile records all the interactions, and the one interaction I'm looking for here is the ZWS NextRev. This is an application I was talking about that we developed, and what that does is it back annotates the design. So if I'm looking at, let me just go back to the part here. This is the manufacturable part that got released at revision A. The life cycle is production, and its revision is A. If I go to its related design object, what I'll see here is it also back annotates the current revision. It'll annotate the next revision in sequence, whatever I define the sequence to be. And it also provides me the life cycle that correlates to that part. So the design and the part maintain synchronization when I'm going through this process. So as I go through release, the normal process in Agile, that information is then back annotated to my design. So as an engineer, I know exactly what the state of the information is in Agile and where I'm at in the process. These fields can also be used to control access to the object. so if it's in a change process but it's not been released, I can actually limit the user's ability, the engineer's ability to actually check out that file and make changes to it until it's complete. And those are just standard functionality that's within Agile. It's not really part of EC, but because EC is integrated, you get that capability. So what I want to do is switch over here for a second. So that's kind of like, I showed you some broad functionality. The one thing I probably should have pointed out earlier, I didn't take into this, was if I go into the Agile menu in the Workspace Manager, this has a view of the workspace. Now it's got two tabs here. One is the CAD environment. It shows you what's in session, and also its state, whether or not it's out of sequence or if it's synchronized. In this case, because I took and I back annotated the information to the model when I was storing it, it's going to go ahead and update the information. So I've got some properties that were updated, but that's okay. It was stored when it went in, so the information in Agile is current. If I look at the workspace here, this is where I can go in and I can develop multiple workspaces. So I can have multiple structures here as far as work environments where I want to store information. And like, for instance, if I go down to this thermo, none of these files have been vaulted yet. If I go to CAD 2 or CAD 1, let's say, just do a refresh here, you'll notice this file here is synchronized with Agile. So I've got the ability to create multiple workspaces, and I can change between them. That way I can partition out my work and keep it separate when I'm going through and developing information from an engineering perspective. Let me just jump back over to Agile for a minute. So now let's kind of talk more about a day in the life of an engineer. So Agile being a fully featured PLM, product lifecycle management system, has the capabilities to allow information to be tagged, sent to users, defined as far as what their interaction should be. So in this case, the design manager sent me an email. Now, what I'm showing you is the same email in my environment of Agile, but it would be in my inbox of my email client. So here, I can see what they want me to do. They've got some quality issues with this particular design, and I need to go in and make some changes to it. They want a prototype, and they want to see that as soon as possible. Now, down below, I've got a hyperlink, so if I was in my email client, I could click that. It would take me directly to the Agile login window, and then once I logged in, it would take me to this object right here. And so in this case, what I want to do is look at my related part. So I'm looking at the design object. I want to look at the related part. I want to go find out what's going on with this design. So we go to the Changes tab to see why this has been tagged as needing modification. It tells me if there's a related kappa. So if I go to the Relationships tab, this is where the quality information can be closed loop and connected to the product structure. So the kappa in this case is just a collection of problem reports, non-conforming material reports. It tells me what the issue is with this design, and then they relate that to a change order so that whenever the changes are made to the design and ultimately released, it'll close out all those problem reports, non-conforming material reports, and also the kappa. So if I go to the kappa, and I also look at its relationships, I'll see where it's collecting up these things like a problem report. So here it tells me what the actual problem is with this particular design. And so what I need to do is go in and make a change to it, develop a prototype, send that through so it can actually be purchased and they can build it so we can actually take a look and see if that's going to satisfy the requirements for this change. So in this case, I'll just go to the design object. And under my actions menu, I'll do a load to CAD. What this is going to do is going to collect up all the related items that are necessary for this to be regenerated in my SolidWorks environment and present it back to me here. Now, in this case, I could go in and check out at this level. I could also say if I was pulling a part from Agile, I want to put it into my SolidWorks, design, I could say insert the component into the SolidWorks assembly. Or in this case, I'm just going to pull it up into session because I'm going to take this information and develop a brand new set of data off of this using Agile EC. So I just hit the Load to CAD button, and what you'll see is SolidWorks will pop back to the front. What I want to do is go ahead and modify this design. Now, I'm not going to go through and actually model everything. It would take too long, but what I will do is switch out some components to show you the capabilities here. So I'm going to take this top part, this top bezel, and I'm going to change this. I'm just going to do a replace with an existing component. So just like you see with the slap, chop, and vents, through the magic of TV, I'm actually going to go in here and just pull a part up that I've actually generated before. That way I don't have to actually go and develop the geometry. Same thing here. I'm just going to do a replace. Replace with this diamond part. So that's the design that I think will work now. So those small facets that I saw with the arrow will no longer catch on the edges and cause it to snap and break. This should be a better design for this little PDA, this little child's device. So what I want to do is now save this in, but in doing so, I also want to separate it from the existing product structure and make a brand new product structure that we can use for prototyping. So I get over the Agile save here. What you'll see is, let me make this window just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to pull this down a little. You'll see the design structure shown here. Now, you'll notice that that new part I related in there, because when I developed it earlier, it was actually built off the top-level assembly. It has a relationship back to the assembly. So this is telling me that there is some kind of external relationship to the assembly. What I want to do, though, is use one of the features of EC is right-click on the SolidWorks assembly and do an assemble save as. What it's going to do is generate a new part and a new design for every object in this structure. And what you'll see down below is these are all going to be brand new. So just through that one click, I generated a brand new structure off that base design set that was obviously problematic. And this is what I'm going to submit for my prototype. Just like I did earlier, I'm going to create a new change order here, create ECO 94. And what I'll do is I'm going to switch my view from this base view for design and look at the item assignment so I can see design information and part information next to each other. I'll select everything, right-click, I'm going to say just assign the change. So again, it's going to put it on the change order. It's going to put a pending revision A, and this is really developed based on whatever the initial value for the sequence should be. So the first time you do this, the first time you publish and put it onto a change order, it's going to propose that first revision sequence in order. The next time I come back and make another change to this, what you'll see is we go out and make it from A to B. It just assumes that's the case. But you can also modify these if you wanted to. You can actually pull this down and change this manually if you needed to. So I'm just going to do a save here. And so now I've got this all set up. You'll notice I've got the two new components here, this diamond and top two. I hit the save. And what I'll do is I'm going to go look for this change order 94. So in the background, what's happening is if I were generating derivative files and we creating those, it's going to check and vault all the information, generate those relationships to the new parts, and put everything on that change order. If I go here and I do a star 94 for change order type objects, it should take me right to this change order. Now, if I look at the affected items, I'll see all those parts that were created. And you'll notice this one assembly has a little red line next to it, meaning that there's a bill of material that's been redlined. And the reason being is it's been placed on a change order. It's a brand new bill of material, and everything's coming in as new objects. So you'll see the red lines here. And that's what's happening. If I go to the associated file attachment tab for this assembly, and I click on this SolidWorks assembly, this is going back to the design object. So again, the interactive nature, looking at the file attachment tab of the part, I went back to the design object, and here I can see the same structure. If I let me just put this in a standard view so you can see this without all the thumbnails. So what I'm seeing here is the design structure. And then if I go back to the relationships tab, you'll notice again it's related back to this top level assembly, this part. But then it's also got this relationship to this top two solid part. And the reason being is, like I said, it was generated and it tagged in that external reference to that part. So that's going to be maintained to the relationships tab as well. Changes tab for the part shows me that's on this change order. And again, if I go to the Affect Items tab, remember the one we put at Revision B is shown here, and then all the rest of the items are at Revision A. And so that's just some of the functionality, the capabilities to take information out of Agile, being able to go in and modify those, put them back in through the EC client as a brand new design set and associate them with the change order. And that's really the kind of the overall demonstration I wanted to provide today. Is just shows a real broad perspective of Agile EC, the capabilities of interacting with the environment, vaulting the information, be able to pull it back out, making changes to it, and also some of the workspace management.